Good afternoon. Welcome to episode 45 of 5 Reasons Not to Harm Your Loved Ones During Quarantine. I'm Lisa Kirsch Satawa, and I am very excited about our latest venture. For today and all next week, we will be talking about abuse and domestic violence. And we'll not only be talking about when behavior becomes abuse, but also when it becomes a crime and the penalties for that. We will have a discussion about the emotional impact as well. I am outside and it is freezing, so I'm a little bundled today. I think we'll start with our coronavirus stats. If you recall, yesterday we went live later because I had to be in court, and so I don't have updated numbers since they're released at 3 o'clock each day. So this is the same as yesterday. So 54,365 cases. It's up 406 from the day before, and 5,223 deaths, which is up 38 from the day before. As far as other updates, Governor Whitmer will be speaking at 3 o'clock today. It's anticipated that she will talk about her recent communications with President Trump about continuing Michigan's state of emergency and her being able to keep the National Guard in our state through July 31st. It's also anticipated that she'll talk about the next steps in opening up our state, as well as, this is, now you're in my guess, not anything official, but I think that she'll probably talk about if they even know the numbers from last weekend after she opened Northern Michigan and the UP. So those are just some things that we can touch on. One of the things that I really wanted to talk about, why I wanted to talk about about abuse and about domestic violence, is because they're kind of like the silent crimes, and a lot of people are suffering, and because of the stay-at-home order, they don't necessarily have access to report or to be safe. There's also a lot of psychological dynamics that go into abuse, and as you know, I love to study and I love to learn, and some of those dynamics have been fascinating, and so we're going to get to those next week. But we'll talk about what goes on in an abuser's mind when they have control, when they lose control. What does research tell us about victimology? What does it tell us about the fear to leave? What does it tell us about justifying staying for your children, and does that work? Are you really protecting your children? So we're going to go into some of those deeper issues next week, but today I just wanted to, as an introduction, talk about different kinds of abuse and some kind of did you know checklist items, because I just love that stuff. So I want to start with psychological abuse, because I feel like that is one that is not highlighted very often. And the thing that is unique about psychological abuse or emotional abuse, and they are defined differently, but are kind of interrelated, is that it can literally happen between anyone. It's not necessarily, a father and a child, or a wife and a husband. It could literally be between peers, between friends, between siblings. It could also be in those power relationships, but it's unique in that it does cross over all the lines. And some of the things that they talk about that are psychological abuse are, controlling where someone can go and not go, withholding information from them, that might cause to make different or better or more advantageous decisions. Public humiliation, deliberately doing something to embarrass a person, denying money or financial resources. I'm going to get to stalking in a minute, but that is part of it as well, is stalking. Demeaning, either in public or in private or at someone's employment, undermining the person's confidence or their sense of self-worth, and convincing the person that they are crazy, that they're self-centered, that they don't have empathy. Any of those things could be considered psychological abuse. Oh, and stalking. And stalking in Michigan has been defined as any time a person no twice if they continue to contact them, harass them. There's a whole list of behaviors. Then that's considered felony stalking in Michigan. And we will spend a whole day talking about the actual offenses next week. So something just popped up on my screen. Excuse me. And so basically, the other reason I wanted to start with psychological abuse is because psychological abuse usually escalates when there's trauma of physical abuse or sexual abuse. And lots of studies have looked at this phenomenon, and they find that the psychological abuse alone causes long-term injury or damage to a victim. It could be depression, anxiety, traumatic stress disorder, increased rate of suicide, low self-esteem, difficulty trusting others. It runs the gamut. And I think that this is something that, when you have a parent-child situation, and there's different things that are characteristic of certain age children that are just because they're that age, and it's not necessarily defiant or a bad thing. It's just kind of a creature of being that age, and I'm talking about teenage boys. And so, sometimes you see parents not really understanding that, they don't mean to not do their homework or not turn in their homework. It's just, it doesn't occur to them to turn in their homework. And so that can kind of escalate into other issues. So I just want to mention that. The facts that I'm about to give you are from the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And basically, and again, this is in regards to psychological or emotional abuse only, 48.4% of women and 48.8% of men have experienced at least one psychologically aggressive behavior by an intimate partner. 4 in 10 women and 4 in 10 men have experienced at least one form of coercive control by an intimate partner in their lifetime. 17.9% of women have experienced a situation where an intimate partner tried to keep them away from their friends and isolate them, or from their family. 18.7% of women have experienced threats of physical harm from an intimate partner, and 95% of men who physically abuse their intimate partners also psychologically abuse them. Women who earn 65% or more of the household income are more likely to be psychologically abused than women who earn less than 65% of their household income. So I thought that that was really interesting because it kind of goes to the egocentric nature of abusers. And so that is, something just to keep in mind. Here's another one that's really interesting. 7 out of 10 psychologically abused women display symptoms of PTSD and or depression. And women experiencing psychological abuse are significantly more likely to report poor physical and mental health and to have more than 5 physician visits in a year. Psychological abuse is the strongest predictor of PTSD, and it exceeds physical abuse for its impact on women. So, and that tells you that, you know, this is something that is very real. And, you know, the next question after I was learning about all of that was, well, is that outlined in Michigan as abuse? Is that a crime? Can that be prosecuted? And the answer is yes, but I'm not going to tell you any more about it today because that's next week. So this is an area that, you know, obviously there's a great deal of there's many facets of it that can, I'm just finding my notes here, many facets of domestic violence. There's many different, it can look differently. I mean, we know the kind of the biggies. We know about physical abuse. We know about sexual abuse. I apologize. I don't know where my notes went. I think they blew away. Give me 1 second. There's also economic abuse. And economic abuse is when someone is denied access to their bank accounts or to money or to credit cards or to their car or, you know, anything that they would need to sustain their daily life and activities. There is also a big, I guess, tilt in what we're seeing in physical abuse. Before it was, we were usually seeing slapping, hitting, biting, and now we're seeing, you know, denying help if you are ill or harmed or hurt. We're seeing people who are being restrained by physical force and not allowed to leave. More objects being thrown, which does elevate the domestic violence to a felony, to felonious assault. And really what we're seeing over and over again, the most predominant thing that I've seen in the last year is strangulation. And I don't know if that's because we have a different statute in Michigan for strangulation in addition to domestic violence, or there's really some, I don't know what's causing that. And I couldn't really find that answer in all my research. So obviously there is a lot, it's a very complex topic, and there are a ton of resources out there, and we'll also talk about later in the week the different factors or things to look out for if you believe that someone has been abused. There is abuse in dating as much as there is with married people or roommates or people who live together. It can be in the form of sexting or texting with sexual pictures. It can be sexual bullying. It can be coercion. It can be, you know, if the answer to how am I being treated by this person who I'm sharing an evening with doesn't have a good answer, then and it doesn't put a smile on your face, you should walk away. There is all kinds of research on the impact of alcohol and drugs in increasing abuse and lessening patience amongst the parties or the people involved in the incident. And there's also a danger, especially in sexual violence, that one of the parties may be drugged by the other actor, or it could be some sort of setup for an abduction or human trafficking. All of this is under the umbrella of relationship violence and abuse. If it's very rare to see these type of, I'll call them more intimate crimes amongst strangers, although college campuses are wrought with issues with dating violence, obviously, and sexual assault. Just talking about abuse in general, abuse can be classified. It's become such a commonplace word in our society that, child abuse. Does it have to be a child who has been, beaten so horribly they're permanently disfigured? No. Does domestic violence have to be the woman who has stitches all over her face and welts and black and blue marks? No. Really, what I want to convey today is that abuse, domestic violence come in all shapes and sizes, all forms. No matter what it is, it's not good. People say, how can you represent these people? And we've talked about that in many different contexts over the last couple of weeks. And no matter what a person is accused of, they cannot be criminally penalized and lose their liberty or risk losing their liberty and their freedom unless the case can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And so just as a while ago when we talked about the balance of power and the checks and balances that go on in government, the checks and balances that go on in the legal system, especially in a criminal case, are the prosecutor is checked by the defense and vice versa, and everyone is checked by the judge. So within our little branch, that's what's going on. And there are a lot of false allegations, and we'll have a whole day next week about false allegations and how they happen and what you can do if you are falsely accused. I'm sorry, it's not going to be good news. But for the most part, it dilutes the real victims when people use these types of allegations as a sword. It's allegations of abuse, domestic violence, because you don't need physical injury. You don't need any visible, you don't need anything visibly wrong with you. You can say, yep, he hit me. And in the right circumstances, that would be enough. So it's a difficult area of investigation. It's a difficult area to defend. That I've had cases that were absolutely real domestic violence cases. I've also had cases where after the husband left the house, the wife cut herself and then called the police and said that he did it. I've had cases where the wife was on the phone with 911 talking about how her husband and her daughter were arguing, and then while on the 911 call, she was like, "Oh my God, he just hit me." Fortunately, one of the teenage children was also calling 911 at the same time, and they said, "My mom just said that my dad hit her. My dad isn't even in the room." And so there's a lot of things that we don't think about that go on in the background of these cases that make them interesting. But certainly knowing what is abuse, what could be abuse when it reaches the threshold, and always be thinking about how an individual is being treated and how that would make them feel, and that usually can curb you to if it's gotten over the threshold of domestic violence or of any kind of violence that may be illegal. Control is the underlying characteristic in all of these cases and with all of this conduct. It may not be an intentional power capture, but it certainly, whether it's conscious or unconscious, the person who is the alleged abuser is definitely needing some self-reassurance and some inner strength that they find through harming others, whether it be psychologically, mentally, emotionally, physically, financially. So it can be, we know about the circle of control and the effect that has on people, and we'll get more into that when we talk about the psychology and why people don't leave. The last thing I want to bring up is, and as I mentioned, all of this is about power and control when they're actual real allegations. But don't forget about the kinds of power and control that you can't see, which is that isolation and exclusion, not being allowed to see your family, not being able to see your friends, having to go to a party by yourself instead of having your spouse or loved one or the person in your relationship accompany you. There are also threats is another silent kind of abuse that people don't always see. And then intimidation, it would be the last one. So, and that could be as simple as, just somebody leaving a gun on the kitchen table. So like I said, there's all kinds of abuse. It can be, anything from a slap across the face to, to actually someone being killed, and it doesn't have to leave a mark. So that's kind of the overview of abuse and violence that we will use as the foundation for our other discussions. And thank you so much for tuning in today. And if you have any questions, feel free to post them. If you have any topics, feel free to send them. And as always, we will end with the 5 reasons not to harm your family during quarantine. Number 1, protective services workers are essential. Number 2, the police are essential. Number 3, our jails and prisons are a hotbed of COVID-19. Number 4, parents can get in trouble for kids being kids. And number 5, very few, if anyone, looks good in horizontal stripes. So just one more little announcement, feeling a little humble today. My baby, who is now 18, had his very last day of high school today. So, just kind of like a wow for me. But anyway, I thought I would leave you with some good news, happy news. And we don't have any sun today, but I hope you have a beautiful and bright day. And I will talk to everyone again on Monday. Thank you. Have a great day. Stay home, stay healthy. Bye.